Ticats lose 28-3 to the BC Lions. I'm here with Spec Steve Milton. We're standing in the end zone where the
Ticat ever stood in, at least not on the offense. Anyways, it was the first time in 10 years that they'd scored as few as 3 points in a game at home, and that, it was pretty ridiculous, wasn't it?
Nothing good, I think, to say about this game. They were bad on offense, they were bad on defense, and they were bad on special teams. And when you lose all three phases of the game, you're going to lose the game.
Yeah, I think what they'll find is when they look at the film, football people always do this. They'll find some things to hang their hat on. To the naked eye tonight, I didn't see a lot except in the first few minutes of the game when they had a couple of interceptions that they could have made. Andy Fantus's fumble, and those didn't really change the game, but they were things that were the only positives. And basically, for 45 minutes after that, I didn't see too many positives at all. They got outkicked, as you mentioned, all three phases of the game, and I think a fourth phase. I think they were outcoached.
Well, penalties were an issue as well. They took 10 penalties for 105 yards, and this was an issue last week that kind of got glossed over because they won the game. But discipline has been an issue with this team, especially early in the season under Kent Austin.
It has been, and I don't know what that is. It's a pretty hyper-aggressive level of game, particularly they play on defense and on special teams. And maybe there's a thin line there that takes a few games to get into, or some examples like this of what can happen. There were a couple of potential turning points in this game, and they never turned. And two of them, I think, didn't turn because of penalties.
Another guy we should probably talk about is Jeff Tisdale, a guy that both you and I know quite well. We've covered him for a long time, and he's a good guy. He's a stand-up guy who talked to us after the game, was clearly disappointed in how he played, and frankly had good reason to be.
Yeah, he got beat. He got beat on a down on a key play earlier in the game that could have gone for another 6, but it was overthrown by Jennings. They were really picking on him, and then he got a couple of penalties for face masking. He didn't know where they came from, but part of that is maybe the Montreal experience where there's an awful lot of jostling that they do in the defensive. And Kent Austin had mentioned that last week. He said that, I asked him about uncoaching a guy that's played in Montreal, and he said, do you mean that because they do stuff? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, yeah, you sort of have to do that. You have to make them aware of that. Maybe Jeff's not even aware of that he was doing that.
I think the other thing that comes out of this game is that all the questions that we had going into the season about quarterbacking, about kicking, about defense, all of those are back. They have another home game next Thursday, short week against the Bombers, another team that's sort of struggling out of the gate a little bit. So they will have the opportunity, I think, to try and right this ship, but we're sort of back to that narrative again.
And one of the other parts we were worried about was the defensive backfield. They kept an extra blocker in, and sometimes two, on every single play. Maybe they had 5 receivers half a dozen times in that game, and yet they were beating 4 receivers were beating 6-7 guys deep, and 6 or 7 in the backfield, and that's just not right. I mean, that's another thing we worried about. We, meaning Ticat fans, worried about at the start of the year, and as you say, those things have surfaced here, and things will surface over time. I mean, you're going to look good one week, but they looked not prepared for certain things here, particularly. Nobody squared off, right? I mean, Jennings got outside on the run, and Johnson, they ran for 125, 30 yards, right?
Yeah.
And that really set up an awful lot of other things. Perhaps what I had mentioned before, the fact that so few receivers could beat so many defenders, and perhaps it was because they had such success on getting outside the end earlier in the game.
Make sure to check out The Spectator on Monday. We'll have a bunch of stuff in there. And 3 Down Nation has all the Ticat and CFL news, 24/7 pretty much. So, reporting from Tim Hortons Field on Canada Day, that's Steve Milton. I'm Drew Edwards.